it's looked like shit the entire time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit, but I figured at this point we might as well upgrade the quality a little bit. So let's see how the Lateral Show looks in 1080p. Ah!
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.
You know what's funny? I wrote that song and I'm not sure I could play it anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely one of those things that because we both played music for so long and it just became the skill that we inherently had, but at a certain point, the things you thought you knew kind of pop up and just, it really kind of turns you on your head a little bit, which is a oddly appropriate way to start the show because this is the Lateral Show, a sideways look at fantasy football. My name is Herms. His name is McLateral. This week's topic is really just about, I mean, we have a couple different things that we're going to discuss, but this has been a weird fantasy year. It's been a weird fantasy year. There are some things like playing the theme song, like we thought we could do, but if, certain things just haven't really gone our way, whether it's, players we drafted with a lot of hope or believing that the waiver wire was going to fix our problems, but it seemed like a good time to address that this week on the show. So welcome in. I hope everybody enjoys it. If you want to get behind the paywall for some of our articles, you can do so at fantasy6pack.net/plans. You also get the DFS tools, access to the Discord community, and our award-winning rankings here at the site. So, that's something you could think about. Also, go ahead, like this video, hit the subscribe button. It would be super helpful to all of us. So yeah. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm all right. Busy day at work.
Always good time.
Stressing out about that fantasy life, as it were. Some things are not going good. Some of us are starting Bailey Zappi in professional tournaments, and it's not great.
Yeah, it's we got to be honest with the viewers and the listeners. It's just like this. As much as we try to be helpful every single week, another aspect of analysis is looking back at shit that just didn't work out and being able to parse through that information and figure out what to make of the mess. So as part of my soapbox for the week, it's okay. It's okay. Herm's on his soapbox here to tell you it's okay. Look, it's like a month into the season, okay? Like, we have so much time to figure it out. Like, yes, if you're off to an 0-4 start, 1-3, like, it's going to be difficult to bounce back, but you can. You absolutely can. Don't be that asshole in your league that stops paying attention and doesn't fill out the lineup every week and just gives a free W to everybody, because that's not cool. You have to stay with it. You have to stick with it. And remember, it's okay. You still have time to fix it. And we'll get into ways that you can fix it later on in the show, but I just wanted to start off by saying that as me on my soapbox. Do you have anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, so I was thinking, and a couple of ideas came to mind. And then someone sent me a text. Then a link to this TikTok. And I think I've landed on it now. So in this TikTok, it's John Hamm. He's talking about this league that he's in. It's actually a mildly famous league. It's like Kim, Bill Simmons is in it. Cousin Sal from the Jimmy Kimmel Show is in it. Jimmy Kimmel might be in it as well. But they have this gimmick where every year the person who wins the league gets to kick out someone from the league.
Oh, this league. Oh, I've heard of this. Okay.
At the draft. So you have to still show up to the draft no matter what. Be prepared, et cetera, et cetera. But one of you is going home. And I want this in our home league so bad. I've mentioned it to Devin before. I truly want this. And I just want to tell all of you, you should all be pushing for this rule in your league. We should all be trying to kick people out because if you cannot handle a year off from fantasy, you don't deserve it. If you cannot take waiting 12 whole additional months to finally set that lineup, you don't deserve it. And so I'm telling you right now, we should normalize the punishment of kicking someone out of your league every year for one season. And that is my soapbox.
Oh, man, dude, man. There's part of me that would feel so bad, but on the other hand, it's also like, it's the ultimate punishment to have it stripped from you. There's really something about
and the best part is it has nothing to do with you being the worst player. It's just someone else being better than you. Like, that's the best part. It's not like the Waffle House thing. It's not like getting a tattoo or having a license plate. It's not like, man, I was so much worse than everyone and I deserve this. No. This is someone else was so much better than you and everyone else, and they hate you so much that they don't want you to enjoy fantasy football for an entire year. And to me, that is just beautiful.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. Listeners, six-packers out there, think about this. Think about this. Consider this. Keep it in the back of your mind.
And on the subject of masochism, the Indianapolis Colts have tied up the ball game. It is 9-9. We are getting overtime in this absolute drag of a game.
Yeah, listeners, you normally get to see this show and hear this show on Thursday morning, but between some scheduling conflicts, we weren't able to get this out. This game weirdly does tie into recapping one of last week's topics, because I was talking about the nightmare of Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson, and to recap my shit from last week is I was right. Bingo.
Yeah. So right now, just so everyone is aware, is the end of 4 quarters, and Matt Ryan and Russell Westbrook have combined for less than 450 yards and 4 interceptions. Matt Ryan is 218 yards and 2 interceptions. Russell Wilson is 213 yards and 2 interceptions. For those of you who picked up Mike Boone, it looks like he got bailed out a little because he had 3 receptions for 47 yards, which is a little surprising. And we got a Divine Ozigbo sighting.
Oh, thank God. We were waiting for that one.
Always fun. These two teams are dumpster fires. They're not good. And it's weird because the Broncos are 2-2. The Colts are 1-2-1. Barring a weird game, they could be 2-2 as well. And I feel like they are 2 of the worst teams in the league.
Yeah. It's pretty bad, man. And there's nothing else to add on to last week's conversation that we didn't already talk about. But just to take people behind the fantasy6pack.net paywall, fantasy6pack.net/plunge if you want to get behind it. I talked about Mike Boone in the waiver column. I felt it was a horrible idea. Probably shouldn't have done it anyway, but hey, at least he kind of bailed you out a little bit, like you said. But before we get into you recapping your thing, I just want to ask, outside of a healthy Jonathan Taylor, Cortland Sutton, and Michael Pittman Jr., is there anyone on either of these teams you give a single care about for fantasy for the remainder of this season?
Melvin Gordon. Just because Javante's out. Otherwise, no. That's it.
So, in case you missed it, the things that we didn't say out loud. If you're holding on to Jerry Jeudy, if you are holding on to Albert Okwuegbunam somehow at this point,
that would be shocking.
I
had him actually involved in a trade in one of my leagues today.
Oh, wow. Oh, there we go. Oh, yeah, just drop it, folks. Just drop it, especially the Judy thing. Actually, you know what? Screw it.
No, actually, especially the Albert O thing. There's no reason for you to have Albert O on your roster unless it's a dynasty league. And frankly, even that is questionable at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, we kind of bailed on that a little bit earlier, but like, because we talked about this before we started recording, so I promise I will get this to you as soon as I say this. But like, the whole Jerry Judy defense team that's out there in the internet streets with their shields and swords, being like, he's good, like he might be, but we're never gonna find out unless he leaves Denver. And as far as I'm concerned, just stop with the whole defending Jerry Judy thing. I'm done. I was done before the season started. Stop doing it if you are those people.
Which is interesting because that's exactly how I feel about Albert O. I was like completely out on him at the start of the season. Like as soon as they drafted Greg Dulcich, I was like, that's a fraud. I'm not doing this. I'm out. I'm not touching it. And it's not like Dulcich has been great, but like Albert O has not been good.
So that puts a cap on the Colts and the Broncos talk. So why don't we get into? I mean, I guess it is a little challenging to recap how to effectively research things.
I've got some ideas.
There you go.
Got some ideas. First of all, actually, a little rookie watch update. Kenny Pickett, our first starter, he's in. Turns out Mitchell Trubisky just that bad.
I was correct.
Desmond Ridder, it's sounding like, by the way, not far behind.
Yes, that is very true.
So if you're in desperate need for a quarterback and you have a deeper league, I would pick up Desmond Ridder, just stash him.
I would.
And then Bailey Zappi officially getting the start this week because Brian Hoyer is mysteriously on the IR. I mean, I think he actually has a serious injury, but that's beside the point. Belichick took one look at that game film and was like, hey, Brian, you're done. You can go home, collect your check. We're good.
Zappy looked pretty good.
Speaking of New England quarterbacks, I saw a hilarious thing on Twitter. It was, I think it was, what was it, like a T-Mobile commercial or something where it's just Gronk and Tom Brady. They're like just laughing to each other, like sitting like out in the sunny Florida. Mm-hmm. And the caption was like Tom Brady looking over the alimony agreement because Gisele Bundchen's worth $150 million more than him. And I was like, touche, internet, touche. But moving on from New England quarterbacks, because frankly, unless you are in a super flex league, I do not think you have to worry about them. I don't think that offense is good enough. I don't think Bailey Zappi runs enough. He actually may be surprisingly decent, but I think the issue is that even if Mac Jones was being surprisingly decent, neither of them was going to be fantasy relevant. You know, if Jimmy Garoppolo got replaced by a Jimmy Garoppolo clone in San Francisco, I wouldn't suddenly be interested in that clone. And Bailey Zappi is essentially a Mac Jones clone.
But he was out there on some dynasty waiver wires of mine. So just like, check
that's
league,
a little more interesting. But I think
I
think for redraft, we can still avoid picking him up. Yes, unless for some reason he is genuinely the best thing out there on waivers, which I'd imagine is a very limited case. But last week we talked about knowing when to bail on players. It's an art, not a science. As an example, I think this week it is officially time, and we've talked about Ridder, time to talk about Mariota. It's time to bail on Marcus Mariota. Like his potential was he was on a team that was winning games and being extremely competitive. He could run the ball. He's not running the ball anymore, so there's no point to Marcus Mariota. So you have to look for like little trends like that. Like if you have a running quarterback who's not running the ball and the offense seems designed for him not to run the ball, then he is not worth it to you. Another one that's interesting to me going into this week is Zach Wilson looks interesting. He finished in the top 12 last week. He was boosted by a receiving touchdown, though. Like that's worth 6 points. So and if you're in PPR, it's actually worth 7 because it's a reception as well. Mm-hmm. So swap that for a passing touchdown. He falls outside of the top 12. He still threw 2 picks. It was against a mediocre Pittsburgh defense. His next 5 weeks are Miami, Green Bay, Denver, New England, and Buffalo. So I'm like, I get that people might be excited. I never believed him in particular anyway, but like, I'm out. It's just like, I'm good. I don't want to touch it. And to me, that's part of this thing. It's like knowing how to read the trends. And like, I think Zach Wilson's past performance in week 4 is a blip, not a trend.
I can get down with that for sure. And just to throw my little Herms candidate for knowing when to bail for the sake of the conversation, I'm going to throw in Allen Robinson of the Los Angeles Rams because that offense is not great, and I'm
Yeah, I
not
think
waiting
you can
for it
bail.
anymore.
I think you can bail.
Yeah.
So,
Because
and we have a dynasty league where I'm holding on to him, but that's because it's dynasty. We have the deeper benches and stuff. He is definitely one of my top cut candidates if I have to, though.
Because I saw after the first game, because I was I just glanced at it. It was either 5 targets, 6 targets. Sure, there's some work going his way, but it's A, not enough, and B, he's just not catching it. So what does it even matter anyway? The Allen Robinson experiment, we just have to. I'm not gonna do this.
I feel like he's never the first read. They're not designing plays for him.
No,
he's just
not at all.
happening to get open or cup's been super covered.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, at least in what I've seen, it's just a lot the field seems a lot shorter now for what they're trying to do. They're really trying to keep it much more contained and which also brings to question, why did you go all out for, and yes, obviously it clearly worked out last year as they won the Super Bowl.
I think that's
whatever.
Why.
But Jared Goff could have done this. Jared Goff could have done this.
Jared Goff could have done this. I think last year Stafford was a little more integral. I think he was performing at a higher level, and I don't know that Goff could have done that. I think that's kind of the difference.
I don't know. I mean,
everyone is, other than Cooper Kupp and maybe Tyler Higbee, everyone is performing worse on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. And even that half of a hypothetical question, I didn't, because there was no point in me even finishing the question because I know why they did it, obviously. But it's still frustrating, especially not only just Stafford, I guess, is another person you could consider as maybe moving on from, not because I'm not entirely
move on from Matthew Stafford if there's a better option available. I think, admittedly, and we're going to get into this later, it might be tough for there to be a better option available. But if there is somehow, or you can trade with someone, because I think that might be a little easier rather than doing a full-on drop, because Stafford, he has that name. People believe in the Rams offense still. You might be able to move on from him, especially if you were in a 6-point passing touchdown league. But yeah, you can move on from Matthew Stafford. It's an anemic offense that's not running on all cylinders, and he doesn't run the ball.
And even if Robinson can't, or we expect maybe won't improve, Stafford still theoretically can. So the difference between the two is pretty obvious, but it's still, for either one of them, it's not great.
I'm weirdly equally willing to move on from both, because I think both have similar upside. I actually think Robinson can improve, because I don't find that he's completely dogging it like he was last year in Chicago, but he's not getting a quality target. If they somehow start designing plays so that he gets quality targets, then he could do well. Similarly, if Matthew Stafford starts throwing the ball a bit better, has a little more time to do so, the O-line hasn't been the best. They can't get the running game going, so defenses can focus more on the passing attack. Those could change as well. For me, I view them weirdly similarly, and I'm willing to move on from both. I just am.
So there you go. That's a little bit of our look back to last week, and also some updated information to go into those topics. But the team we were just talking about transitions very beautifully into my topic, because the whole Cam Akers thing I don't think is ever really going to happen again. He has not looked very good. Darrell Henderson's also been very disappointing, but more than just
that's a guy I'm really debating about whether to drop or not. But we'll get into why I'm not just yet later on.
For sure. And it's not just because I think they are very emblematic in some ways, I guess, of this larger problem. Anybody who's been playing fantasy this year is aware running back is a nightmare. It is. The whole sound the alarms. I've spent the entire history of this show talking about my affinity for the running back position, how much I love it, how interesting it is to me, how much I love to build my teams around those guys and all of that stuff. But we talked very early on in the spring about, hey, maybe it's time to focus more on drafting receivers. As the two of us went through summer and looked at ADP and looked at all this stuff, we were like, hey, maybe we should focus on some of these receivers. And so far, the trend of going toward receiver in fantasy has become even smarter of an idea than we anticipated, because not all of the reasons we highlighted are even coming to figure into the equation as far as this goes. So what am I talking about? This is what I'm talking about. When you look at the running back position right now, for a lot of us that play in like a half PPR or PPR, like that's relatively standard at this point. That's what we do. We look for running backs with pass catching upside, because that's a huge, component of being able to, supplement that area of scoring for, your overall fantasy output. Austin Eckler is pretty far and ahead leading running backs in the whole receiving category. I mean, he's caught 27 passes. He also leads in receiving yards. But once we get past him, y'all, I mean, J.D. McKissick is up here tied with CMC. That's a bit of a mess. Rex Burkhead's super high up here with 16 receptions, tied 7th with like Leonard Fournette and the now injured Javonte Williams. So, like, between actually catching the ball and also just receiving yards for running backs kind of being a mess outside of a handful of guys, what we're looking at is, and also to some degree in real football right now, like actual NFL football, the running back has to be a good running back. We were talking, as we were going through developing the plan for the show sheet and then everything, for this right now, the traditional running back is just what's happening again. It's become more in vogue. We're looking at some of the the running backs that are doing really well right now. Nick Chubb, you said it, man. We clown it all the time for talking how he doesn't have a lot of pass catching upside and doing all this stuff, but so far, league-wide usage of running backs, that's really been kind of the key component. And guys like him and Josh Jacobs, they're doing pretty well. Derrick Henry, despite kind of regressing in certain areas that I anticipated, doesn't really seem to matter, because the guys I thought that were going to be better than him aren't doing the thing, aka catching the ball, that would make them better than him. And I've talked about this ad nauseum on different shows that I've been on in the past, where looking at, and even we have on this show, adding an extra game to the schedule with the workhorse, quote unquote, running back being a dying breed, the shift toward these committees. We have to completely abandon everything that we think about fantasy running backs. We have to, because what we got used to in terms of the player archetypes that were good for us flashed for a brief number of seasons and then have seemingly all very much fallen off. I'm not going to go super far with what I think about for the future right now, because I want to hand it back to you before we get into the future of the running back position, but just based off of everything that we talked about before we started recording, everything we're talking about now, where is your head at with this?
So, I mean, one of the things you can really look at is just what is the top 12 doing. So right now, the wide receiver 12 in PPR scoring is Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase is scoring 16.1 points per game. You go over to running backs, and the number 12 running back is Cordero Patterson, who's scoring 14.7. So there's almost a 2-point per game difference between these two guys, so like 1.5. Mm-hmm. So that's not nothing. So for that reason alone, drafting a wide receiver instead of a running back with your earlier picks, like, can be a benefit. I mean, you've got 4 guys with 21 points or more for wide receivers. You have 2 when it comes to running backs, Saquon Barkley and Nick Chubb. If you go to Joe Mixon is scoring 14.3 points per game. He's RB 15. You go to 14.3 points per game, wide receiver 19. That's Garrett Wilson. And that's not even including Michael Pittman, who's scoring more than that in terms of points per game. But because he missed a game, he's lower down in the overall ranks. So we're talking about 20 wide receivers compared to 15 running backs giving you the same output. So if we look at it from that Moneyball perspective of the goal is to get points, that's all that matters. Drafting wide receivers instead of running backs is getting that done. It just is. Because actually, even another one, Michael Thomas is doing 17 points per game. He missed one game, so he's lower down. But like, you just add these guys up, and like, it's just a better play. And I think there's less question marks about these guys. And then you have some flukier stuff like, I'm sorry, Clyde Edwards-Alaire being the number 4 running back just doesn't feel sustainable. This is a guy who had a line, what was it, 2 weeks ago, where he had 7 rushing attempts for 0 yards. Like,
but he scored.
I'm sorry, what?
Like it's, yeah.
But yeah, I think being able to run the ball really matters. Saquon Barkley can run the ball. Nick Chubb can run the ball. Austin Eckler can run the ball, but a little more of an anomaly. Clyde Edwards-Alaire definitely more anomalous. But then Jamal Williams can run the ball. Christian McCaffrey can run the ball. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Miles Sanders, Aaron Jones, James Robinson. These are all guys that can run the ball. Like Aaron Jones does it with a little less volume, but he's always been hyper efficient. That's one of the things we tout about him. So, I think we have to start treating the position differently. I agree with you. And that is why for me, next year, redraft, only drafting rookie deal guys. That is the move. And I think you could have built a pretty good team this year if you timed it right and just picked up Breece Hall and Dameon Pierce. Like, yeah, would have been maybe a little rough, for a week or two there. But right now, Dameon Pierce is RB14, Breece Hall's RB17. And they're both trending up, and Breece Hall will definitely be a top 12 guy by the end of the year, barring injury.
Yeah, dude. And like, that's kind of what makes the future part of this conversation so interesting, because like, we do know that these players possess the capability to be used in a wider breadth of responsibilities and ways that they're being asked to do right now. But I talk about this frequently, but I never go into super great detail about it. But I'm planting the flag here now in October, so that way, nobody can, I don't know. I have to say it. The talent cycle in the NFL at the running back position tends to run somewhere in like a 5 to 7 year window anyway. That is also very broadly true in fantasy football, where we get used to a certain number of guys just being, this is who we're drafting early, and we stick with it because it works until it doesn't. Because they get old, they get hurt, they get banged up. And we talk all the time, with the analytics and the whatnot, the running back age cliff being what it is around 26, 27, especially once you turn 28, like, whoa, unless you're Derrick Henry for some reason, but whatever. Like, these guys are aging out. And while it is irresponsible to play redraft fantasy football, quote unquote, like it's dynasty sometimes, with how good and talented some of the younger running backs are that have come into the league recently that maybe don't have a ton of opportunity quite yet, and this 2023 class of guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, potentially Sean Tucker, Bijan Robinson, very interesting players also in 2024 for the next couple of years, but especially in 2023. I'm not even talking like conventional zero RB. Like I'm just going to completely ignore it all, because we're going to get ourselves into a situation where the fantasy community is going to defend the veterans that we're used to defending and justifying why last year was bad, but why they can still be good. And because we're going to focus so much energy on that, we're going to doubt ourselves and be like, well, where are these young guys going to find this opportunity? Where is it going to happen? But we're seeing that cycle of running back talent is about to completely pancake over again. It's about to flop again. And the way that Sean Siegel over at RotoViz even introduced this idea, as I understood it from the time period that he introduced it in, that was a similar time in the NFL where those guys we were used to were starting to, it worked till it didn't. And there was a huge influx of talent behind them. We are on the precipice of that happening again with these guys like Gibbs, Bijan Robinson. Even 2024, we're talking Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. We've got some interesting stuff going on.
I mean, we're seeing multiple running backs not get their fifth-year options picked up too.
Yeah.
It's including guys who are good, like Josh Jacobs is good. He has been good. He has been a borderline RB1 in fantasy for pretty much his entire career. He's currently RB7, and he will be a free agent next year.
Yeah. Like, it's, I guess, so my ultimate final big thing with this is I have not been converted into a 0 RB person, because I think when you are in the middle of the cycle, it makes very little sense to go away from something that we know is going to work.
I just don't think we know it's going to work anymore.
Yeah, I'm not willing to go quite that far yet, but what I will say is that in the research that I've done into the theory behind 0 RB, but also when the origin of the whole explosion of it came, like, it came at a specific time, and it really worked for a specific time because it hadn't, but like, while the pancake is still mid flip, and that stuff is working, like,
I guess for me, my thing is, who are the running backs right now that you are positive will be fine if you draft them next year, barring future injuries?
oh boy, off the top of my head, I mean, like, they're all under the age of 24. Like, that's probably about where I'm at with it.
I think I've got like 2 or 3, maybe 4, and half those guys aren't in the league right now. I'm pretty sure Breece Hall will be good. I'm pretty sure Jonathan Taylor will be good.
He'll
And then, like, the top 2 running backs from this class, which are going to be Gibbs and Robinson, or Robinson and Gibbs, depending on how it goes. But, like, those are the only guys that, like, I'm pretty sure will pan out. Like, wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, Marquise Brown, A.J. Brown, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins. These are all guys that, like, I am confident it'll work. I have no concerns. And right now, it's working. All those guys I listed off, they're top 15 guys. And I think they will be top 15 again next year.
So, like, I think just, like, the looking at this and understanding all of that, like, my biggest conclusion is, like, if you look at the course of all of this stuff and you strategically choose when to execute 0 RB, it can be a winning strategy. I think I'm beginning to understand how it really works and when to deploy it. And 2023, I'm all of my teams, I'm going for it. Planting that flag right now, beginning of October. We have to start thinking about this now, folks. Don't even bother taking a running back in the first, like, 6-7 rounds next year. It's going to be a waste of your time.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm much more adamant not taking one in the first round. I think around round 3, you can think about it. Because I think round 3 is about where you had to get a guy like Breece Hall this year.
Mm-hmm.
So, that is someone who it's like I'll be interested in. I think that's a round where you could probably see someone like Bijan Robinson or, Gibbs go. But I'm not going to take any of those guys at the expense of missing out on someone like Chase or Jefferson. Just not.
It's just not going to make sense. Yeah, like, dude, I'm not a full convert, but I've definitely shifted my opinion of the strategy because it's starting to make a lot more sense if you execute it properly. So,
all right. Well, so am I up then? Is that so I have bad news. You can't actually fix your team via waiver wire.
Shit! Oh, damn it.
I'm sorry. Like, we talk about this being a thing. Like, oh, don't worry. You can fix it via the waiver wire. And, like, I write essentially a waiver wire article with the heat check. I'm like, hey, these guys are still out there on waivers. They could potentially be useful. Now, granted, there are some weeks where I go, none of them are useful. That does happen. But if you look at the guys who are currently fantasy starters through 4 weeks, here are the ones that you were able to get off a waiver wire. Geno Smith, QB 10. That is the entire list of quarterbacks. Running backs, Khalil Herbert, RB 13, though he's only successful because he was an injury handcuff, and frankly, he was still drafted in a lot of leagues. I know I don't think I had any leagues where he didn't get drafted, but I think he merited being included on this list because a lot of people dropped him after week 1.
Yeah.
So you still picked him off of waivers. That is the entirety of the RBs.
Jamal
That's
Williams.
Actually, I think Jamal Williams probably got drafted in your leagues.
No, but I just know this because writing the waiver wire article for the Fantasy Six Pack website, both of those guys were hovering around the 50% mark to the point where they qualified. But it still proves the point. It's still only two of them.
And I would say Jamal Williams, much like the next guy I'm going to mention, you had to get in week 1. So Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 16, you had to get him in week 1. After week 1, you weren't going to get him. Josh Reynolds, wide receiver 25. Corey Davis, wide receiver 26, who you can actually still get, by the way. He might be the Jets' leading wide receiver. He is still available. If when I write the heat check, he is still rostered in few enough leagues, he will absolutely make the cut.
That's a good call.
Devin Duvernay, wide receiver 27. Noah Brown, wide receiver 29. Matt Collins, wide receiver 32. Z McKenzie, wide receiver 34. Romeo Doubs, wide receiver 35. So there's some bottom, like wide receiver 3 guys that you
Greg Dortch, 37. He's close. Okay.
Well, A, still not top 36. B, he's dead as a Dortch nail, as it were.
I had to say it, though.
Because everything we had been saying, where like we were the second Rondale Moore comes back, Greg Dortch will be useless.
I know.
Rondale Moore came back and Greg Dortch was useless.
That's true. That's very true.
That's the list of wide receivers. And then tight end, you have Gerald Everett, tight end 6. You had to get him after week 1. Tyler Conklin, who you can still get. I wrote about him in week 1. He's tight end 8.
What are you doing?
You can still get him. Go get him.
Yeah.
And then Will Dissly at tight end 10. And admittedly, we all know why you can still get Will Dissly. And I don't think you should, but that's a separate issue. That is not a long list. Like if there are 12 people in your league, we're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
13 people. So maybe one of you got 2 good people off of waivers through 4 weeks. That's not enough. You have to draft well. You just do. There's no way. Like we were talking about with these wide receivers, earlier when discussing running backs versus wide receivers and the draft strategy, like the teams I'm doing well in, and I have been saying this, they are the teams where I loaded up on these talented wide receivers. And like you drafted, you got the value, and now you're running a team that's got Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, and Marquise Brown on it, which isn't uncommon. Or you got AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, and Marquise Brown, or you have like T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson. That's like there are so many of these teams where you can just stack it with wide receiver, which is unfortunate because wide receiver is also the one where there's the most options currently on waiver wire, oddly enough. Though I think even then, when we dive into some of these guys, Noah Brown, it's an injury thing. I would say Josh Reynolds is an injury thing as well.
Yeah,
So,
I mean,
and even you got to be a little cautious on that front. Devin Duvernay is weird. I think he's very touchdown heavy. I still don't expect that to be.
He's a big play guy. I mean, we
Yeah.
talked about it all offseason. I mean, the second wide receiver in Baltimore really can't be counted on consistently week to week.
It's tough.
Great DFS play. If you know when to do that, good on you. Because I know he's a popular DFS kind of under the radar guy periodically, but like for the purposes of our show, like, yeah, I mean, that's, like, and even then, like, to your point, like, well, these guys helped. What kind of help is it if they're just doing this because of the injury, like you said? Like, I got, just because I just have to throw this out there. I think your average fantasy football manager is considerably smarter now than they were 3 years ago, 5 years ago.
Tons of podcasts. There's tons of sites out there. Obviously, our podcast and Fantasy Six Pack are the best of those options.
Let's be honest.
But like, we know people, and we've been those people where it's like you used to maybe watch your home team play, and you looked at some box scores. Maybe you looked at red zone. And now, like, your average fantasy player potentially knows how many targets a guy's getting, like what his target share is, what maybe his combine numbers were like.
Yeah.
Like, it's a totally different ball game. And so I think you're seeing ADP really coalesce, and we know who the playable guys are. Like, even with running back, like, if you get to like running back 36, all of a sudden you start getting a little more stuff. So, like, there's Jeff Wilson at running back 30, there's JD McKissick at RB 33. Though he might have still probably gone in your drafts as like a Naheem Hines territory type of guy.
Maybe.
Really depends on the size of your league. Rex Burkhead, running back 35. So those are like an additional 3 guys. Dontrell Hilliard, RB 38. But like, you take that out and like your top 44 running backs, the vast majority of them were drafted onto rosters.
Yeah.
And not, it makes sense for the majority of them, but I'm talking the vast majority. I mean, we're finding maybe
It's like all of them.
maybe 4 guys out of 44.
Yeah.
So if you do the math on that, which I'm going to do here real quick.
Sounds good. Dude.
So that means 91% of your top 44 running backs were drafted. You were not able to get them off of waivers. So you really have to do the work. You have to draft properly. You have to mock. You have to study. If you want to win your fantasy league, you're going to have to do these things. And the good news is, if you do those things and then it turns out you are in a more casual league, you can absolutely dominate. So one league that I'm in where waivers have been helping me was the one league where I got auto drafted. And that's because it's a quirk of the league. So this league, you have to auto draft.
Yeah,
It's a standard league. There are no flexes. It is some older guys in this league. And
it's the camp counselor that ran the fantasy sports camp I talk about sometimes. So
and because of that, there are some guys that got left on waivers. So I picked up Chris Olave and I picked up Melvin Gordon and I picked up these guys. And that's going well for me. I won't lie. But that's really the only league that I'm in where I feel I've been helped with my waiver guys. Like our home league. I mean, you've seen it. The only thing that's changed my lineup is that I now start Brees Hall instead of AJ Dillon.
But yeah,
that's like basically it. I finally decided to drop Deontay Johnson onto my bench. I'm playing Chris Olave, but these are like all guys I drafted still. Like these guys we're talking about are guys I drafted. Admittedly, I am having to play waiver roulette at quarterback because I drafted Trey Lance, and it's been a problem. Like I picked up Marcus Mariota. We thought he was going to run. He's not running. So now I'm trusting my season with Geno Smith. And I got to tell you, it's going to be a wild ride. But he was the clear best option out on waivers. Like it's that rough. And so I think we just can't count on waivers fixing your team. And if we do, like you're going to have to get it right in week 1 a lot of the time. And it's kind of been that way even when waivers could fix things more. And I'm sure we'll see someone break out more as the season goes on. Something will happen. There will be a weird injury. I mean, Mike Boone weirdly would be like an ideal candidate for this, where it's like Javonte goes down, there's Mike Boone and Latavius Murray, and we're deciding who like is going to be the number 2 guy.
And there's still a chance like Caleb Huntley, like if Tyler Algier doesn't do, he was another.
So admittedly, I've stashed a lot of Caleb Huntley this week.
I have to.
So that could be one where like that could prove to be true. And as the season goes on, it may ultimately be the case that it turns out you can fix your team a little with waiver, but it just makes it so much more difficult if you have to do a ton of work on that front. As good as you can be, it's just so much work and it's so difficult. And we're seeing that through for 4 weeks.
And I think it's really great that we paired these topics because the common theme that ties both of them together is that we don't know anything definitively now other than the competition level in fantasy football is better. It's better. Like you being the one person in your league that really really paid attention and, just like taking suckers for their money at the end of the year doing their whole thing. Like, that's just, I mean, obviously those leagues still exist, but that number is dwindling. It really, really is. Between the people who were sharp about running back this year and the people who were sharp about the other positions and making sure they didn't have to go to the waiver wire, both of these, like, that's people that spent time, did their thing, and even for as good at it as, we are, as you listeners and viewers are, like, we all still have our mistakes. We all still have our teams that aren't as good as others. So if you're not doing well in a league, we're not saying you're not prepared. I mean, obviously there's still an element of controlling something.
Yeah, injuries happen even.
Yeah.
Like, there's only so much you can do. Like, you could have drafted Trey Lance and Javonte Williams, and a lot of people before week 1 started would have said, nicely done.
Yeah.
That's solid. Or even throw Michael Pittman into that list. And, again, I think those are guys who are on consensus. We were like, yeah, those are good guys to have. You would be SOL.
Yeah. So always remember that there is hope for the future, and always remember that there is still work to be done. There is still work to be done, and grinding away and being able to help you all with that here at the Lateral Show, here at Fantasy Six Pack. That's honestly, I'm going to be real. I have more fun talking about stuff like this than I do about just like the regular ass shit that, like, it's like, here's our start sit show. Like, as fun as that stuff is, I mean, like, honestly, like, what's fascinating to me about fantasy sports in general, not just fantasy football, is just like the concept around it, which has always been the point of this show anyway. But like, this is a very good hallmark example of what the Lateral Show is. And for that, I am very proud.
Well, with that being said, do you want to get into a Thrive fantasy pick?
Yes, I do. Are you a DFS person that doesn't like to do the normal DFS thing and you like prop picks instead? Well, I got good news for you. If you sign up for Thrive Fantasy using promo code Herms, you get a 100% match on your first deposit up to $100. That's what I'm saying. So I'm talking, you put down $10, boom, $20. You put down $25, boom, $50. That's what it's all about. Sign up using promo code Herms on Thrive Fantasy. It's your boy.
I like the idea of, are you a DFS person that doesn't like DFS?
I throw things out there, man. I
try. I can dig it.
I thought it stuck pretty well. Yeah. For somebody who never bothered to sit down and actually script this ad read, I think I do okay. But yeah, the interesting thing, especially about Thrive, is that the prop returns are pretty solid. Definitely a lot higher than you would get on, say, an Underdog or a DraftKings or a FanDuel or whatever. And that's what I really like about them so much, because like they really reward you for being correct. So if you build a really solid parlay, then you could do pretty well with that. So for the last 2 weeks, I would like to point out my articles at fantasy6pack.net. If I remember correctly, I hit on all 3 of my picks the last 2 weeks. So I've started to get pretty good at this.
Nicely done.
I definitely have. And I don't necessarily have one prepared, but boy, am I vamping super well right now, because this is...
Well, luckily, I have one prepared for you. And that is Chase Edmonds, 48.5 total yards. That's rushing yards and receiving yards combined. Unfortunately, if he throws a pass, you're not gonna get that one.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm taking the under. I get it. They're playing the Jets. That's why the over feels so enticing. I'm just going to read off to you Chase Edmonds' performance so far this season. 25 rushing yards and 40 receiving yards in week 1. Okay, getting off to a good start. 33 rushing yards and 8 receiving yards in week 2. That's worse. 21 and 6 in week 3. And then 6 and 14 in week 4. Guys, it's not going the right direction. And they're doing fine. Like, this is a 3-1 team that frankly is largely 3-1 because its quarterback went down. Like,
yeah,
2 of the top 5 wide receivers in fantasy are on Miami. Like, they're doing well. And Raheem Mostert is currently still healthy and the lead running back on this team. So I'm taking the under. It's easy to fade Edmonds, and it's exactly what I'm going to do.
I don't blame you at all. And keeping it in the running back realm, because I was able to, plug in some fun researchy tools, which is part of what goes into my process behind the article every week, folks. So Devin Singletary, they have at 52.5 rushing yards. And it's going to be a rough game for my Pittsburgh Steelers. Don't get me wrong. Like, the Buffalo Bills are going to do very, very well against them. And it is a run defense that you can definitely abuse. But unless you already possess a pretty competent and robust rushing attack, I'd like to think we have a pretty good bend but not break type unit. And so far this season, I think that's really held true. I mean, the Steelers' run defense is been pretty good. I mean, I have it in front of me here. Yeah, so the PFF ninth best in terms of run defense grading. Now, there was that one week on the Thursday night, obviously, Nick Chubb ran all over them. But, I mean, we got finished talking about
As
him.
we've talked about, he's ran over a lot of people.
Yeah. So it's like, that's just what happens. But, if you look at their game log, definitely just from that standpoint, like they've been very good. Like, they were pretty middle of the road against Joe Mixon in the opening week, but he didn't really do like a ton necessarily. But my boys also did a pretty good job of shutting down the Patriots rushing attack. They did a pretty good job of somewhat neutralizing the Jets, because Carter and Hall are both very talented, but they did a lot of damage through the air. So with Singletary's usage so far this season and the irritating split that he's seen with the smattering of James Cook, but also the annoying presence of Zach Moss, I don't know that there's a full guarantee that Singletary is going to go over that rushing total. I still think he's fantasy viable. I still think he'll have a pretty good game, but 52.5 rushing yards for him is not something I'm particularly enthusiastic about picking the over for. So that's probably where I would look for that one. It's, I wish I could say more nice things because I love Devin Singletary.
That might be a good segue, though, for my bust pick this week, because I think Deontay Johnson's going to bust. Deontay has been like one of my big disappointments this season. I was very hopeful, and then it turned out quarterbacks at Pittsburgh were not so good.
Nope.
And I thought Ben Roethlisberger was not so good. It turns out Mitch Trubisky is really not so good. So Deontay really saw his target share fall off last week with the arrival of Kenny Pickett under center, and we simultaneously saw George Pickens target share go up.
Let's go.
And I think that while Deontay will bounce back a bit long term, that is an overall trend that I think we're going to see continue. I think we are going to see Deontay Johnson's usage go down a little bit from the just absolute target machine he had been. And I think we are really going to see the ascendancy of George Pickens. Another waiver pickup actually in that league I was telling you about. I got him this past week. I'm very excited.
So excited.
But yeah, so I think Deontay Johnson will fall short of his 14.1 point projection, and I think he will fall outside of the top 36 wide receivers this week. I'm just super worried about that matchup against Buffalo, who has a really good but a bit injured defense. And Pittsburgh, I think, is going to just be on their heels a bit. And then for my boom pick this week, I think I'm going with a guy we've talked about just now, Caleb Huntley. I'm betting on him to be Atlanta's answer at running back with Cordero Patterson out. It is a total bet. I just think that when he got the opportunity, he did well enough with it. I don't think there's anything special about the other running backs on the roster. And, I think he will take advantage of that. His projection is only 5.1. I think he sneaks into the bottom end of the RB2. I think it happens.
I mean, hey, there's a decent. I mean, you never know. I'm definitely placing my chips on Algier, but there is a reason why people picked up both. There's a reason why people picked up both.
I get it. I have just not been impressed by Algier at all whatsoever since he's come into the league.
I take the vibe. Also, fun fact, because it ties in from earlier a little bit. At no point so far this season has Devin Singletary hit the over on that prop. So that's a very high bar for him to clear.
I don't eep often, but when I do, it's an eep.
Yeah, that's quite the eep for sure. Damn, I really hate. Oh god. So I bring this up mostly because like
You
not
need to
only is
vamp.
it's my bust pick, but also I'm going to tie the beginning of the show all the way to
Oh,
the end of the show
oh,
here.
there's a
Um
plan.
there is a
I love
plan.
it.
Is it time to give up on Alvin Kamara?
Give up's a
Like
strong word.
it makes me so sad.
Is
Full
it time?
disclosure, he's my favorite non-Pittsburgh Steelers player in the league. I adore Alvin.
Is it time to
Kamara.
regret
Like,
the draft capital you spent on Alvin Kamara? Yeah, it might be. Is it time to fully give up? I don't know that we're quite there yet.
yeah, it's because I mean, still questionable to play. There's still a decent chance he'll be able to roll out there. 13.3 PPR points projection, and it is against the Seahawks. So,
You
like,
are pretty bad.
it's
on
horrible.
defense.
I've mentioned them in the waiver article here at Fantasy Six Pack pretty much every week because I always look to see who plays Seattle because it's been money. I'm not picking. So I'm using my bust, quote unquote, as an honorary. I'm not making a pick, but I'm kind of making a pick
I'll allow
type
it.
move
I'll allow it.
because it's like if this does not work out, I may be foreshadowing what we're talking about next week without even having seen week 5 action yet, other than the Thursday night game. So definitely be aware of that. But the boom, man, I don't know if we're necessarily going to see it if he does play in this first game. But folks, Brian Robinson's back. He is off the NFI list. The Commanders are going to integrate him. And I wrote about this a little bit, both behind the paywall in the waiver wire article and in the free portion. Look at Antonio Gibson's usage, because after week 1, with that huge 7-catch performance against Jacksonville, it has gone just precipitously down. He completely lacks job security whatsoever. The whole time stash this dude on your IR. You had a chance. I don't know what his rostership percentage is now that he waivers have run. I haven't checked since then.
Can't imagine he's available much.
Yeah. So I sincerely doubt it's super
if you're in an
attainable,
ESPN league, you may have a shot. 60% rostership in Yahoo, 40% in ESPN.
Okay, so Jesus Christ, boom pick. I don't even care if I'm right this week or not. This is your last chance to pick up Brian Robinson. We spent a whole part of the show talking about how the waiver wire hasn't been helpful. Here's one
way he could. Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree.
It's there. It's right there. He and Jameson Williams should have been stashed in your IR the whole goddamn time, folks. This is it. You have one more opportunity.
Ooh, and if you want a poor man's version, Gus Edwards.
I put him behind the paywall. That is, he's coming back to practice, folks. And
I picked him up in Scott Fishbowl somehow this past week.
Yeah,
not sure how that was doable. Oh, he's only rostered in 13% of Yahoo leagues. Go get Gus Edwards. You should absolutely
if you need the help, because Justice Hill getting hurt, and it's not like so Justice Hill making Kenyon Drake and Mike Davis immediately useless says everything we need to know about who's running behind Dobbins. So the path is there for Gus Edwards. That's a guy that
And we could have told you that Mike Davis and Kenyon Drake were useless, but I digress.
In fact, we even tried. I remember
several times.
We did. So for more infinite wisdom like that, you can tune into the Lateral Show every single week here on the Fantasy Six Pack YouTube network. My name is Herms. You can follow me on Twitter at HermsNFL. You can find my written work on this website. I also have some weekly stuff that I do with our buddies over at Football Absurdity. And I've got some other cool things that I am excited to announce, but do not have the authority to actually announce. So just keep that little teaser in the back of your mind. But remember, folks, dreams do come true if you're not a total, complete piece of shit. So there you go. That's what's up. McLateral, what about you? Where can they find you?
Total piece of shit, you're fine. If you're a complete piece of shit, you're fine.
Yes.
But if you're a total complete piece of shit, that's where the line's drawn.
You cannot be both. You have to be one or the other.
It's good to know. I've got some wiggle room then. It's your boy McLateral, aka McLateral FF. And lest we forget, ladies and gentlemen, eats and greets, season's eating.
Oh no!
Tis the season of the eat. We never forget. An elephant always remembers. A yeetiphant always remembers, as it were. You can find me on Twitter at McLateral FF. You can also find me on Twitter at MacMcMillanATL. Been dropping some stuff as usual over at Tom's Guide, where I just did our Overwatch 2 review. And we just had our big, Google just had their big event, which was a big event for us, where they just dropped a bunch of new phones, a smartwatch, teased some tablet stuff. So go over there if you're into the latest tech, entertainment, and gaming stuff. Aside from that, you can check out the Heat Check every week on Fantasy Six Pack, dropping on Saturdays. There won't be any running backs this week. I can tell you that much. Nobody qualifies. Nobody. Making a list. I'm checking it twice. I think you'll get a quarterback, and I think you'll get a wide receiver. But other than that, I'm still looking for a third option. So stay tuned to see who drops on that. And wow, hour and 20 seconds. What do you think about that?
I think we did pretty good, and that's the latest edition of the Lateral Show!
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Lateral Show. Fasten your seatbelts, because here we go.